When Marilyn Monroe left this world in 1962, the world of cinema lost more than just a star. It lost an illusion, a dream, a woman who carried the weight of the world's gaze and broke under it. But across the ocean, another young woman was rising, a girl with the same golden hair, the same dangerous innocence, the same power to stop time with a single look. Her name was Brigitte Bardot. She was not an imitation. She was a storm of her own, a spirit of rebellion, a face of desire, and later, a voice for the voiceless. The woman who could have been destroyed by fame, yet chose instead to walk away from it forever. This is the untold story of Brigitte Bardot, a girl born into war, raised under shadows, who rose to become the most photographed woman in the world. A woman who loved, who failed, who gave herself away to cinema and then took it all back to dedicate her life to a cause greater than herself. The woman who carried the torch of Marilyn, yet wrote her own legend. Brigitte Anne-Marie Bardot was born on September 28, 1934, in Paris, a city trembling under the shadow of war. The world outside her window was filled with fear, air raid sirens, soldiers marching, neighbors whispering about hunger and survival. While most children played with dolls, Brigitte grew up in silence, learning early that life was fragile, uncertain, and often cruel. Her father, Louis Bardot, was a strict, traditional man, stern, distant, expecting discipline and perfection. Her mother, Anne-Marie, known as Toadie, was softer but demanding in her own way. Toadie wanted her daughters, Brigitte and her younger sister Mianou, to be elegant, cultured, and refined. Love in the Bardot household was not shown with embraces or laughter. It was shown through rules, expectations, and endless correction. As a child, Brigitte often felt invisible, overshadowed by her younger sister, who was seen as prettier, more obedient. Brigitte was shy, awkward, her eyes cast downward, but then her mother enrolled her in ballet school, and for the first time, Brigitte discovered the power of movement, the freedom of her body, the poetry of dance. She trained at the Conservatoire de Paris under the sharp eyes of teachers who demanded grace, stamina, and perfection. Hours of grueling practice toughened her tiny frame, blistered her feet, and tested her will. Yet in dance, Brigitte found a secret escape, a way to express emotions she could never say aloud at home. But even here, the shadow of war lingered. Bombings shook Paris, shortages made life hard, and Brigitte learned quickly that beauty and art existed side by side with chaos and destruction. She carried this duality all her life, the softness of a ballerina and the fire of a survivor. Still, the shy little girl with downcast eyes did not yet know she would one day face cameras that belonged not to one teacher or one audience, but to the entire world. A world that would love her, devour her, and never let her go. By the time Brigitte Bardot was a teenager, the shy little ballerina had begun to transform. Her golden hair, wide eyes, and natural charm caught the attention of her mother's friend, who introduced her to the world of fashion. At just 15, she was chosen as a cover girl for Elle magazine. That single photograph, innocent yet magnetic, would change her life forever. It caught the eye of a young director, Roger Vadim. He was not just captivated by her beauty. He saw a star waiting to be born. Vadim introduced Brigitte to cinema, and soon she was offered her first role. In 1952, she appeared in Le Trou Normand, The Crazy Show-Off. She was only 17, nervous in front of the cameras, unsure if she belonged. But when the lights hit her, when the lens captured her face, the world seemed to pause. A year later, she appeared in Menina, The Girl in the Bikini, wearing daring costumes that scandalized the French public but made her unforgettable. Brigitte Bardot was no longer just a dancer or a model, she was becoming a symbol. Through the 1950s, film after film shaped her into France's brightest star, Act of Love, alongside Kirk Douglas. Carolyn and the Rebels, The Light Across the Street. Each role added another layer to her mystique. She was not like the polished Hollywood actresses. She was raw, natural, effortlessly sensual. She could laugh like a child, cry like a woman, and seduce without trying. But it was in 1956, under the direction of her husband Roger Vadim, that she exploded into international fame. The film was Et Dia, Crée la Femme and God Created Woman. In it, Brigitte played Juliette, a wild, free-spirited young woman in a sleepy French town. The film was daring, erotic, and scandalous. Critics were shocked. Priests condemned it, but audiences could not look away. Bardot was fire, sunlight, and danger all at once. She became the face of French cinema, the woman every man desired and every woman secretly envied. Overnight, she was no longer just Brigitte Bardot. She was BB, an international symbol, the very definition of sensual freedom. Photographers chased her, crowds screamed her name, and her face appeared on magazine covers across Europe and America. Marilyn Monroe had left a void, and Bardot filled it, not as a copy, but as something new, something unapologetically French. She was the promise of freedom in a world still bound by rules. Fame came like a storm, sudden and overwhelming. And with it came love, or what seemed like love. In 1952, still just 18, Brigitte married Roger Vadim, the man who had discovered her, the man who directed her in God Created Woman, but fame is a dangerous third partner in any marriage. As Bardot became the most desired woman in the world, their bond cracked under jealousy, affairs, and the constant glare of the spotlight. By 1957, their marriage had ended, leaving Brigitte alone at the peak of her fame. Her heart longed for stability, for family, for a place to rest. In 1959, she married actor Jacques Charrier. With him, she gave birth to her only child, a son named Nicholas. But motherhood did not come easily to Brigitte. The cameras still followed her, scripts still demanded her, and inside she battled her own fragile emotions. She confessed later that she never felt ready to be a mother, that she was too broken, too hunted by fame to give her child the peace he deserved. The marriage collapsed quickly, leaving scars that would never heal between her and her son. Her search for love did not stop. She found comfort in fleeting romances, musicians, actors, artists. In 1966, she married German playboy Gunter Sachs, who showered her with flowers and gifts. For a while, it seemed like she had found happiness. But soon the glamour faded and the same emptiness returned. The marriage lasted only 3 years. Brigitte herself admitted, "I am not made for marriage. I am not made for children. I am only made for love." Behind the beauty, behind the image of BB, there was a woman falling apart. Reporters saw the glamour, but close friends saw the tears, the depression, the desperate attempts to escape the cage of her own fame. More than once, Brigitte tried to end her life. In 1960, on her 26th birthday, she attempted suicide after another failed romance. It was as if the brighter the world adored her, the darker her private world became. And yet, she kept returning to cinema. Films like La Vérité, The Truth, in 1960 showed not just her beauty but her raw, dramatic power as an actress. The role mirrored her own chaos, a woman in court torn apart by passion, judged by society. It was one of her most acclaimed performances because in truth, Brigitte was no longer acting. She was living the part. By the late 1960s, Brigitte Bardot had reached heights few women ever dreamed of. She was the most photographed woman in the world. Directors begged for her presence, designers shaped entire collections in her name, and the press called her the very spirit of France. Yet behind the lights, her soul was weary. Every role felt like a repetition, every premiere another mask. She had lived half her life for the camera, and the camera had taken more than it ever gave back. As the 1970s arrived, Brigitte began to drift away from cinema. She made fewer films, often criticized for repeating herself, for being more icon than actress. But what the critics did not see was the truth. Bardot no longer needed cinema. She was searching for something cinema could not give her: peace. In 1973, at just 39 years old, Brigitte Bardot made a decision that stunned the world. She announced her retirement from acting. No farewell film, no staged goodbye. She simply walked away. While others clung to youth, fighting against time, Bardot turned her back on the screen forever. "I gave my youth and my beauty to men," she said, "and I am giving my wisdom and my experience to animals." From that moment on, Brigitte dedicated herself to a new mission: the protection of animals. She sold her jewels, auctioned her belongings, and in 1986 founded the Brigitte Bardot Foundation for the Welfare and Protection of Animals. Where once she had been the goddess of the screen, now she stood in slaughterhouses, protested against fur, and spoke against the cruelty of bullfighting, seal hunting, and factory farming. The world that once desired her body now heard her voice, sharp, uncompromising, and fierce. This was no hobby, it was sacrifice. Brigitte gave away her fortune, risked her reputation, and turned herself into a warrior for those who had no voice. She was insulted, mocked, even sued for her bold political statements, yet she refused to bend. Fame had not destroyed her. It had transformed her into a soldier. By the 1990s, the woman who had once rivaled Marilyn Monroe was no longer on posters or screens. She lived in Saint-Tropez, surrounded not by directors or actors, but by rescued animals, dogs, cats, horses, even donkeys. For some, it was a tragedy. How could such a legend vanish from the spotlight? But for Brigitte Bardot, it was freedom. At last, she had escaped the cage of fame. For every great star, there are rivals, mirrors, and comparisons. Brigitte Bardot was no exception. From the moment she stepped onto the screen, the world compared her to Marilyn Monroe. Both blonde, both sensual, both symbols of an age that longed for freedom after war. Yet while Marilyn was Hollywood's fragile diamond, Brigitte was Europe's wildfire, untamed, defiant, refusing to belong to anyone but herself. She shared the stage of global fame with Sophia Loren, the Italian goddess of curves and passion. Where Loren was earthy and maternal, Bardot was wild and unpredictable. With Jeanne Moreau, the French intellectual actress, Bardot seemed almost like the opposite: instinct versus intellect, passion versus poise. Even Catherine Deneuve, who would rise in the 1960s, was often called Bardot's successor, elegant where Bardot was explosive, mysterious where Bardot was open. But perhaps the most telling comparison was not with other actresses, but with time itself. Unlike her peers, Brigitte refused to age on screen. She stepped down before the years could write lines on her face under the harsh eye of the camera. Where others clung to their careers, Bardot chose disappearance. In doing so, she kept her legend frozen, forever the young woman running barefoot through Saint-Tropez, forever the goddess the world could never fully possess. Powerful emotional closing. Bardot today. Today, Brigitte Bardot lives far from the flashing lights in her Villa La Madrague in Saint-Tropez. She is in her late 80s, her golden hair turned silver, her once public life now hidden behind high walls and silence. She no longer walks red carpets or poses for magazines. The crowds that once screamed her name have faded into history, and yet, she remains one of the most famous women on earth. Visitors to Saint-Tropez still whisper when they pass her gates. Journalists still wonder about her reclusive days. And the animals, the thousands saved through her foundation, remain her true companions, her chosen family. She has outlived her rivals, her lovers, even the world that first adored her. She is a relic of another century, yet also a reminder that beauty, fame, and youth are fleeting, but conviction endures. Brigitte Bardot once said, "I gave my youth and my beauty to men. Now I give my wisdom and my experience to animals," and so her story closes not with tragedy, like Marilyn's, but with transformation. She is not the woman destroyed by fame. She is the woman who walked away, who sacrificed everything the world treasures in order to live by her principles. She began as a ballerina in wartime Paris. She became a symbol of freedom and desire, the rival of Monroe, Lauren, and Deneuve. She burned through marriages, heartbreak, and despair. And then she chose a different stage, where her co-stars were not men or actresses, but the creatures of the earth. She gave up cinema to fight cruelty, gave up applause to protect life. And in doing so, Brigitte Bardot carved her place in history as more than a star. She became a force of nature. Today, the world remembers her not just as the goddess of French cinema, but as the woman who proved that even beauty can be a weapon, even fame can be sacrificed, and even the most fragile soul can change the world.